Okay, the last few tutorials were focusing mainly on oil and steam vents, and I had to leave out a lot of information because they weren't really relevant to the subject, but they were relevant towards the decent running of a base. So I just want to cover some of the things I left out, and I want to cover some of the mistakes I made in some of my earlier tutorials. First one being when choosing your first two duplicants, I advise you to get one with high creativity. That is no longer a necessity anymore. Because of the way jobs work for art, you don't need high creativity. You just need to get the artist up to, the level 2 art job, and then they'll actually become decent enough to do mid-level statues, which is all you really need. So your first two duplicants can be effectively blank slates. The reason being, the artist, all you need is the job, and the rancher, all you need is the job. The ranching skill doesn't actually affect how well ranchers work, and it doesn't really make any difference. Any duplicant can do ranching regardless of what skills they have. Uh, the second mistake I made was repair costs. I was advising that repair costs were 100% of the cost of the item itself. That was incorrect. The correct repair cost is actually 10%. I misread a decimal point. So just don't worry too much about the overloads then. I'd still dismantle any overloaded circuits if you get them and replace them just to save on resources. But yeah, that was another mistake. Next thing I forgot to mention was algae in the slime biome. Early on, when you're digging into slime biomes, there's a possibility you will dig up algae, and this algae can be infected with slime. By default, it's not. It's just if it's adjacent to slime, slime has this tendency to infect nearby tiles. So if you look at it, you'll notice the actual germs themselves, they're overpopulated and dying, plus it's on a solid surface it shouldn't be able to live on, so it is technically dying. But if you mine this, there's a chance your duplicants will pick it up, bring it back to your oxygen diffusers. Yeah, over here. And those oxygen diffusers will turn the algae into oxygen, but that oxygen will contain slime lung. So that is another way slime lung can get into your base. I have a tendency to centralize algae early on. I try and do a big collection at one point and dump all my algae into a central location. That way my dog's body will be close to it, and if any of these diffusers want algae, it's more likely that duplicants will take it from a nearby source as opposed to dragging it all the way from a slime biome. That is one thing to be aware of with slime biomes is infected algae. Atmosuits or exosuits, whatever you want to call them, they seem to be named both inside the game somewhere. They actually don't just affect your athletics. Like if we look at athletics here, there we go. Exosuit engineer, which is the job you get. This one up here, exosuit engineer, gives you +2 athletics. So this duplicant has +2 athletics from the exosuit engineer skill, but if you look down, you'll see below twinkle toes they have atmosuit -6. If you wear an atmosuit or exosuit, you will get a -6 to the duplicant's movement speed. That's -60% of their base movement speed, so it's pretty bad. But below that, you'll see exosuit engineer +6. That's one of the bonuses they get from the job. So effectively, once you get exosuit engineer or move the duplicants into it, the -6 you're getting from the atmosuit is gone, and the +6 is eradicating it, and you get the +2 from the exosuit engineer on top of that. It's very, very handy. The second thing that's not as well documented is their digging skill. For example, Dog's Body here, he doesn't do any digging himself, that's why his skill level is 0, but the atmosuit gives +10 to digging. That's a massive bonus. So when you get duplicants into atmosuits, they'll dig way faster. That's like a +250% digging speed on top of base. It's enormous. Most duplicants won't have even 10 digging speed by the time you get access to exosuits. So this makes excavation an awful lot easier once you get access to them. Next up, scheduling. Now, I've been changing around the scheduling a bit since we last checked it. The main difference is I added on extra downtime. The further and further you get away from your base, the longer it takes for them to get back. So I had to put in an extra block of downtime. So they're up to 4. However, I removed one of their bedtime shifts. If we look at the duplicants here, so they've got a stamina meter. This stamina meter goes down during the day, and during the night when they're in bed, the stamina goes up. Now, the thing is, duplicants will stay in bed until their stamina hits 100%. Even if these duplicants are scheduled to be awake and to go out and go do stuff, once they hit bedtime or once they hit down the bedtime schedule, and once they get into the bed, they will not move again until their stamina hits 100%. So the reason we only have 2 slots here for bedtime and we remove the third one is they'll be really close by because of the way we've engineered this. They'll be able to eat, use the bathrooms, and then right across to the bedroom. So it shouldn't take them 2 tiles to get there. We're leaving in 2 just to be safe, but these duplicants will now stay in here. For example, we'll check just to see if anyone's got higher stamina here. 75, and Dog's body is 74, so look at Brain's Dog. For example, his stamina is going to max out before he even needs to wake up. So right now he could theoretically get out of bed. He's actually 100% rested. He's got his morale bonuses and all that. So only having two slots for bedtime is perfectly fine, assuming you design your base close to the food and the toilets so that they can perform both those duties and then go to bed immediately. This just allows you to save a little bit of time, and you're basically swapping one bedtime schedule for one downtime. Because all these time here, this is wasted time. We don't want wasted, but we need it just to keep the duplicates happy. Next up, Decor. Now, I did a few changes in the Decor. I switched to paintings because this place was starting to freeze out of it. But the biggest change was the window tiles. You get window tiles in here. And I made them out of diamond because that was the easiest thing I had available at the time. What this does is it basically turns these floor tiles into opaque for the purposes of decor. Like if you'll see here, you can see the statues above and below and the paintings highlighting as I move up and down. Before, when there was sandstone tiles, the only thing affecting them was the floor they were on, but now the ones above and below can jump in on this. So if you'll notice there, someone sleeping in this bed is affected by all the statues. All the statues you can see there that are highlighted, they're affecting everyone, that tile. Even the statues 2 floors down, they're all affecting that tile. This is stacking up an enormous amount of decor in a small amount of area. Now the total decor, maximum decor of 120, that has not applied yet. At some point that will be changed though. At some point that will be changed, and when it is, window tiles will still be useful. More as a case of you can put a small amount of decor in, or a large amount of decor in one area, and then put glass tiles everywhere so you're sure everyone's stacked on top of it. There'll be a change to the meta when it's implemented. We'll see what happens. Okay, now to cover pipes. Pipes that pump liquid or gas are pretty much identical. The only difference between liquid pipes and gas pipes is liquid pipes can carry 10 kilos. One liquid pump can fully saturate a liquid pipe, because a liquid pump can pump 10 kilos. Gas pipes can carry 1 kilo, but a gas pump can only move 500 grams, which means you need 2 gas pumps to fully saturate a gas pipe. But barring those differences, their behavior is identical in almost every respect. So, first thing we're going to cover up here is how to get your oxygen flowing correctly, because while this is liquid, it applies equally to gas. This is the most common problem you'll experience, is where you're trying to split oxygen off when you first get it piped. You're going to have this issue where it keeps jamming like this, and you're only getting half throughput here. All I've done here is I've put in this liquid valve, and this liquid valve is set to 100 grams. We could set that to 1,000 if we want. Now, what's happening is the liquid comes down here, and as far as I can tell from the game mechanics, it always tries to go the direction it couldn't go last time. So it gets here, realizes it can't go left, and then goes right. The next bubble of liquid comes along. Since the last packet went right, it tries to go left. It can't, so then it turns. But it takes it a second to make that decision, which is why you end up with these gaps in the flow. Now this quickly becomes a problem the longer your oxygen supply gets, and the further into your base you're going, and the bigger your base gets. So how do we avoid this and keep it flowing continuously? Well, that's where these liquid bridges come in. Well, liquid or gas. Now I've also set this one to 100 grams. Set that to 1,000 just. There we go. So now only 10% of the liquid can make it through here. The rest of it is all getting backed up. But it's still flowing perfectly smoothly, unlike this one. That's because we've got this liquid bridge here. The input goes in here. When it gets to the other side, if there's space, it just zips out. And we've effectively doubled our throughput on this bottom pipe. So if you're ever breaking gas off or liquids off, and you're trying to split them in multiple directions, first thing you do, put down a bridge, and then split them off that. I could split this off in 4 different directions, and it would all equally spread out amongst those 4 different directions. And there'd be none of this backup here wouldn't be a problem. So this is a very important mechanic to get your head around. It's very, very, very useful. All right. Next up, we're going to cover this, where 2 liquids are merging or 2 gases are merging. This way it's drawing equally from both sides. There's no limits on these at the moment. So it draws equally from both sides and both of them get spit at the end, which is fine if that's what you want. In this one down here, we're using a liquid bridge and taking advantage of another mechanic, preferential flow. When the liquid bridge feeds on, it will basically allow whatever liquids are going through here get priority. This green bit here, the output, will only take liquid from the other side if there's space on this pipe. If there's no space on this pipe, this won't flow. So since there's no space on the pipe, this liquid can stay here. This is very handy for dealing with things like steam vents or those infinite resources. Resources that, natural gas, something like that that's coming out of a vent or geyser. You want to use those first, and then you have a backup tank coming from, say, other sources like fertilizer plants or something like that, and you don't want to use those until your actual renewable resource is running low. At that point, you want those to kick in. So what we'll do here is we'll restrict the flow here to indicate that, say, things are going downhill and we're running out of that resource. So once we do that, you'll notice here, even though it's only 500, only half the throughput of the pipe is coming through here, the rest of it is the slack is being taken up by this line. It's actually adding its flow in to make sure everything tops up and gets through. This is also a very important mechanic. We use this for lots of things. It's also very important for overflow. Overflow is one of those features we've covered just briefly when I was doing oil. So we'll do a little demonstration on overflow and how you can use it to your advantage. Now, to demonstrate overflow, we're using the same bridge system again. We've turned off the input here, so no liquid can pass through here, which means this bridge is quite happy to dump the liquid off on the other side. And since all of the input coming through here can escape out the other side, it more than happily goes out that way and everything is going exactly as planned. But what we want here is we want, say, this input to keep going in here because this is, say, a vital service, like it's a power plant or something along those lines. But if the power plant is getting enough resources, we want that excess, say, petroleum to be diverted to plastics. Plastics are not a high priority, we want the power first, but if we have overflow, we'd like that to go into plastics. So we're just going to turn this on here to simulate that we've got more oil, let's say, or petroleum than we need. We'll just turn this on to, let's make it 1 kilo. So we turn on 1 kilo of production there. And now what's happening in here, just 10 kilos is coming along, it hits the bridge, goes across. Then since there's a kilo coming in this direction, only 9 kilos can make it across. We're still getting the full flow out this direction and the power plants are still getting all their power. But the excess we can then divert along this line. So this is basically an overflow pipe. By sticking a pipe at the sides of these, you can create effectively overflows. And you could do 3 of these, so you could have 3 overflows and you could separate them out. There's multiple things you could do. But this allows us to create an overflow system, and this mechanic is very handy. We can also put sensors on this. That's how we do overflow tanks and things like that. But these mechanics, these simple mechanics for this, these mechanics really help you control precisely where your liquids go, where your gases go. And just even this simple one here that allows you to make sure that you don't get those jams can save you an awful lot of hassle and keep your base alive when it should have died. These are a little bit tricky to get your hands on, but I'll put the save up with the map and you can play around in here and figure out how they work yourself. So to top up our water supply, the first thing we're doing is going to build a little insulated tank inside here in our water tank. And this is going to be to hold water that we've sieved. Now it'll be 40 degrees, so we don't want to dump it straight into our cold water. So we're just going to store it in here until we chill it down before we dump it in. And the water I'm bringing in from over here, I've put in a couple of sieves over here, some compost to take care of the waste, and we're just going to draw water out of this polluted water tank and put it into these. Okay, the water tank's filled up now, so what I want to do is install thermal shift plates made out of ice. This ice is all from when we took apart some of those earlier cold biomes. Now these thermal shift plates are basically just 800 kilos of icy cold water. It's almost a full tile. So what we're going to do is just put a few of these in here. And what this will do is it'll help cool down this water. We want to basically add thermal shift plates to taste, and the taste we're looking for is about 23, 24 degrees. Once it hits about that point, we'll just dismantle this water tank and let that flow in with our cool water. As you can see here, the thermal shift plates are melting almost instantly. The moment they go up, they absorb so much heat from this water, they instantly melt. Now they're all coming in at These things should be about minus 20 degrees, give or take, depending on what's going on in the actual cold biome at the moment. And since they're 800 kilos, they're almost a full tile of water. So this will quickly help bring this down to about the recommended temperature. Okay, after some sidetracking, I managed to fill this up with ice, and now it's all looking about 22 to 24 degrees. So we're just going to deconstruct this tank and let the water drop in here. Now, one thing to note about this is I don't really need this water right now because I'm entirely on omelets. I don't actually have any crops taking water. The only thing actually draining water out of the tank right now is the toilets and the sinks. That's it. Nothing else is actually consuming water. Oh, science lab. That means I'm draining about 10 kilos per duplicant per day, so about 90 kilos of water. This is going to last me a long time, what's in there, but this is just a good, decent way of actually getting, well, getting some clean water if you're struggling at a certain point, and there's always that point in the game where you want more clean water, but you haven't got the infrastructure to do it with energy. This is just a nice, fast way to get that organized. And as you go along, you're going to start getting your hands on plastic. I just let one run constantly. There's no need not to. The only really, well, the major benefits of it are high pressure steam vents or high pressure vents so that you can vent gas out. The other things are ladders. Plastic ladders have a 25% movement speed bonus. And you can't just rip out a whole ladder system, so normally what you do is you just sort of deconstruct it, well, piecemeal. Basically, you Swiss cheese your ladder system, and then after you've chopped out half of it, you replace it with plastic. Pretty much the same as Swiss cheesing for debris purposes. Actually, I've been using that Swiss cheesing for debris pretty much everywhere. I find it the fastest way to get rid of stuff. Like this whole area here, I Swiss cheesed it to start. I think I've done everything as far as this line here. But yeah, I'll Swiss cheese probably the rest of it and let it all fall down here. Those resources sit at the bottom and your duplicants can go down and pick them up and bring them to the appropriate area if needs be. Or you can actually set up automation to pick them up later. Okay, so I've accidentally chilled my base just a little bit too much. I removed most of the wheezeworts ages ago. It's just the oxygen I'm pumping in is quite cold if you look at the temperature. So normally the surrounding heat, I didn't insulate so well over the side just to let the heat in so that it would kind of bleed it out a bit. Like you can see it's quite hot over the side of the base. Yeah, it's up to 66, but over here it's kind of actually getting a bit chilly, so I'm going to demolish the last wheezewort I had that was left there for the crops, but I've stopped using those ages ago. And I might actually have to crank out one of these vents and place it somewhere else. It's a very unusual problem to actually end up getting a cold issue, but worst case scenario, you can put in some furniture like, where's the heater? There's an electric heater you can put down. Here's utilities. Yeah, space heater. You can put down a space heater. It's a quick thing to counteract, but yeah, maybe plan a little bit better than me and spread out those air vents so you're not freezing up one whole area of your base. Quick tip for dealing with polluted oxygen. You're going to want to put down lots and lots and lots of deodorizers, but every time you click the deodorizer button, this weird interface comes up. Just turn the oxygen overlay off. This way you can actually keep an eye out for the little green blobs of polluted oxygen and put down the deoxidizers in the appropriate location. Just a little tip that saves you a bit of time, especially when you're running around trying to figure out where your oxygen is, and all you can see at the time is this. Like, that doesn't really help me figure out where the polluted stuff is. Quick check-in on the hatch farms at around cycle 220. It's evening out at about 22 critters. Seem to be remaining relatively stable around there. Sometimes I go up a critter or two, but I generally don't seem to drop below 21. That happened once, but the rest of the time seem to be just quite stable. I'm very happy with this system. I would heavily recommend it. Slicksters are a little bit trickier to catch. The problem with them is you got to catch them with critter traps. You can't actually catch them by wrangling. The downside of that is these critter traps, they're made of plastic and they have an overheat temperature of 75 degrees, which if you've ever been down to the oil biome, that's a problem because it's usually over 80 degrees down here, which means the moment you place these, they're going to start taking heat damage, and once they take heat damage, they will eventually be destroyed. Now, so if you look at this here, it's slowly gaining heat. And if we don't catch something in it soon, it will eventually be destroyed. However, that said, once it's actually sprung, it doesn't seem to get damaged. I haven't been able to actually make them overheat at that point. A sprung trap doesn't actually overheat. So you kind of have to place them really quickly and hope you can nab them before it actually burns up. That said, you can't also put them in liquid. If you put them in liquid, they won't work. They'll be submerged. So Yeah, these are this is a tricky thing to do. They probably will modify this in the future so you can add elements to them to make them withstand higher temperatures. But for now, you really have to, well, aggressively place them and hope you can catch them before they are destroyed. Now, if they are destroyed, just deconstruct them. You'll get the materials back and then you can reconstruct them again. But this is definitely one of the more frustrating parts of the game. Now, if you'll remember earlier, we built in this pit. This pit was for catching liquids that fell down, and which reminds me, at the same time, this also acts as a pit for your CO2. All this CO2 and chlorine is all going to float to the bottom of your base, and eventually it will all end up down here. So what I like to do is, I don't like that rainbow feeling it gives me, and it affects it takes a lot of processing power to calculate where all the gases go. So I like to stick a gas pump down here. And this gas pump is hooked up to a couple of filters. The first one is for carbon dioxide. If it finds any carbon dioxide, it dumps it into the oil biome. And if it finds any chlorine, we dump it into this tank. We're going to have uses for chlorine later, and it's one of those non-renewable resources, so I like to siphon it into a tank for later use. And then any leftover gas is sent up here. If there was any other gases present, like say natural gas, I'd also have a filter for the natural gas, and I'd dump that into a tank. And any gases it picks up that are not chlorine or carbon dioxide might be polluted oxygen in there, so I like to stick it above a deodorizer of the vent. This allows you to just keep the base nice and clean. Not essential. You can leave all bunches of gases down here. It won't kill you. All your duplicants are in exosuits. But I do like to remove them so it reduces the strain on your CPU and basically speeds up the game just a little bit as well. Okay, unfortunately I lost the footage on this when I was actively using it to fill this system. But what we're looking at here is a little room I normally use for pumping hydrogen at remote locations. My hydrogen stash is all the way on the opposite side of the map. It's way over here. So while I theoretically could run pipes the whole way over, it's sometimes more efficient to just use a canister filler. A canister filler allows you to stick 10 kilos of hydrogen into a canister and then your duplicants can carry it to wherever it's needed. So what I'd like to do when I'm trying to do a remote setup like this where I need hydrogen, I simply set up a canister emptier in the room on the ground floor, gas pump on the top floor, and then I will pump that gas down to where it's necessary, as in here. So the gas pump would come down here and I would have a gas filter here. And the gas filter would take two inputs, one from this gas pump, one from this. Both of them would go into the gas filter and all the hydrogen would be sent down here and everything else would be vented out. This way we can fill this room with hydrogen in a remote location and the duplicants will actually come back and forth dropping off hydrogen into this canister emptier. Now it does release the gas just into the surrounding room, so it's not perfect. But for hydrogen and light gases, you just basically stick it on the ground floor. And if it's something heavy, like say you want to move chlorine into a room, you can put the gas canister up here and the vent on the ground floor. Of course, you'd have your access up here as well. That way the gas will all float down and none of it should escape the room. I didn't have any hydrogen loss when I was doing this. But yeah, you don't always have to pipe things. If you only need a small amount of gas in an area, canister emptier, gas pump, and a gas filter, problem solved. Slickster farming. So the gas pressure in here was getting quite heavy, as I mentioned in one of the previous videos. So what I wanted to do was set up a slickster farm. Now, I already have two hatch farms, and I don't want to be farming these for actual food. What I want them to do is just consume carbon dioxide. So all I've done here is set up a small slickster farm. It holds 7 slicksters. Sorry, I've just loaded this, so hadn't caught up there, but it holds 7 slicksters. The room is big enough to hold 8, but what we're doing here is grooming them, making them all nice and happy to improve their reproduction rate. So it's up to 17% a cycle. They actually have the exact same reproduction cycle as hatches. Same lifespan, same reproduction rates, everything. And what we're doing is setting up a whole row of incubators. Now this is quite energy intensive, but this allows me to basically mass produce slicksters. And what I'm doing is dumping them over here into this room. We've got 15 so far. So we'll fill this room with slicksters and it's open to here so that they have plenty of room for, I don't want them overcrowding. So I'm not going to seal them up inside a smaller room. They want to be in a nice big room where there's enough room for all of them. And I'm not bothered counting out how many tiles it would take for all of them. I'm also setting up another one over here and I've sealed this off. So this is technically counts as a room as well. There's already a couple of molten slicksters. Personally at the start, I prefer going with just straight slicksters. We just want crude oil for now. Later on, we might switch into petroleum, or we will be switching into petroleum, I should say. But until we switch over to petroleum, I don't want these guys dumping lots of petroleum on top of here. When I do switch to molten slicksters, that petroleum will be going into a dedicated tank. It won't be being dumped in with this crude oil. And in the meantime, it's just, well, it's messing up the coloring down here. Color scheme's gone all to hell. But yeah, 7 slicksters. Put down as many incubators as your power cable can manage. I've got a fair few things on this, a couple of gas pumps. It's also running the gas pump filter system we covered earlier. So this is pretty much close to maxed out. I can't even stick another incubator on here. But with these 6, I should be quickly able to fill up this area, and that'll be 40 well slicksters on each side. Now, these slicksters are showing as glum because these are tamed slicksters. So because they're glum, it reduces their metabolism by 80, which is kind of annoying, which means they're not as efficient as these ones. These ones have much better metabolisms, so they're consuming a lot more. So we need a lot more than we would normally need if we were running a very active farm. But with enough of these, if they're not producing enough, just make more of them. That's the whole plan. If we need more after this, we can cover it.